everyone, what's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, your host here at Crimes Untold. And today we're going to be talking about not that any of the other cases haven't been sad, but this one, I remember when this was reported on. It's very sad, it's very tragic, and I know it's kind of like, I'm not trying to pull you in with this case, but this one is pretty brutal. Today we're going to be talking about the murder of Matthew Shepard. So this is a case that I have put off covering because it's very hard to talk about. And during research, I rewatched the Lifetime movie that came out about him. I remember watching that with my mom and absolutely crying in hysterics watching it. I remember seeing about the court case on TV. I remember seeing it all over the news, all over the tabloid magazines, all over the newspapers. My mom was really into seeing what was going to happen with this case, because this case left a mark on everybody, not just the ones that are involved, not just the Shepards, not just the lawyers, his friends, any of his loved ones. This crime has left a mark on this community forever. Matthew Wayne Shepard died on October 12th of 1998. He died a very violent death. A very violent death. I do have a timeline of things. I'll kind of reiterate some things to go over specifically about Matthew and one of his killers, how they knew each other, and that was something that was brought up within the court case, and it's something that's not really talked about, which gives a lot of insight as to who Matthew was and who Aaron McKinney was. So I'll give you a brief synopsis of what happened to him, and then we're going to go into the timeline where I'll go back into what happened to him, which is absolutely tragic. So Matthew Shepard died after he was brutally tortured, beaten, and left for dead near Laramie on the 6th of October. He was taken to Poudre or Powder. I'll put it on the screen. I'm going to butcher it no matter what. So a hospital in that valley after he was found. He also was moved. I'll kind of get into that too. So Matthew Shepard grew up being the kid that was very friendly to all, but he was an extremely easy target for bullies. He was a smaller framed male. He wasn't athletic. He was more feminine. He didn't really come out about his sexuality for a while, but he wouldn't let how people looked at him stop him from his interest in politics. Eventually he would go into political science. That was his major at the University of Wyoming after he went to Catawba College and Casper College. But he did not have the easiest life. Like I mentioned, he was a target for bullying, and he also would be brutally attacked. So while in high school, he went on a trip to Morocco. He was lucky enough that the high school he went to, they ended up going to Morocco, and it's during his time there that he was brutally beaten and gang raped by a few men. Because of this attack, Matthew would experience panic attacks, and it led to an extremely depressive state that would basically cloud his brain. If you've never dealt with depression or had bouts of depressive thoughts, it's hard for some to truly understand this. So following his attack and his bouts of depression, he would be hospitalized, and also he would have some suicidal thoughts. And it's believed that during this time he started dabbling in drugs, and this would lead into his college years as well. But this attack isn't what we are ultimately talking about. We're talking about his death. So the first time that he met Aaron McKinney was on October 6th of 1998. Well, and that's the first time that people believed he would meet Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson. So they offered him a ride home, but they would end up going somewhere else. So this is the day of his attack. So they would drive him to a remote area. They got out of the vehicle. He would be pistol whipped, tortured, and they would rob him. They would then tie him to a fence made of barbed wire and leave him to die in freezing temperatures. His skull was fractured to the point where they couldn't they beat him so bad to the point that his face was covered in his own blood, and the parts on his face that you could see were washed away was from his tears. That's how badly beaten his face was and how covered his face was with his own blood. The actual parts of what led up to where he was tied to the fence came out during questioning and with Aaron and Russell's girlfriends, and it hurts seeing what they did to him. So, which I'll get more into as we go over the timeline. Right now I'm giving you a brief overview of what happened. Matthew would be found 18 hours after he was attacked. And he would be found by Aaron Crafels, who just simply thought that Matthew was a scarecrow, but he was extremely mistaken. So he then called the police, and Reggie Flutie was the first cop on scene, who then called in transport for Matthew. He was first brought to the Ivinson Memorial Hospital, which is in Laramie, but then he would be moved to the advanced trauma ward at the I'm not gonna say the name of the hospital, but the Valley Hospital in Fort Collins, due to the excessive amount of trauma on him. So he experienced such severe damage to his brainstem that his body couldn't control the functions of what was happening. His body temperature was fluctuating, his heart rate was fluctuating, and some of the other functions of his body he couldn't control because his brain couldn't speak to his body. That's how severely damaged his brainstem was. If you don't understand how a body works or how the brain controls your body's functions, the brainstem is the old brain. That's why if you've ever seen a picture of a brain or a diagram of it, there's the brain itself and then there's your brainstem. And it's called the old brain for a reason. That is connected to your corpus callosum, your nerve center, basically, and it controls all the functions of the brain. I'm just giving a brief synopsis. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a biologist. I'm not, what is it called? I'm not a physiologist. I'm not any of that. I know basics of the brain, how it works, and that's what I'm using, my basic knowledge. And his brain no longer could communicate with the rest of his body. They were also afraid to operate on him because if they operated on him, they were afraid it would cause an extreme fluctuation to his health, and they were simply just trying to stabilize him. Unfortunately, he would never regain consciousness, and he was pronounced dead at 12:53 a.m. on October 12th of 1998, 6 days after the attack he endured. So Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson would be arrested, but it would be after cops find a bloody gun in McKinney's truck, and this is after they are a part of a fight. So following them attacking Matthew, they're involved in a fight with an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old. There's a cop that comes to the scene, and they ended up seeing a blood-smeared gun and Matthew Shepard's credit card in his shoes inside of the truck. So they end up fleeing the scene, and basically this is just the start of a domino effect in this case. These men try to have their girlfriends give them alibis during the time of the assault, but the girlfriends also would end up being charged. Before I kind of get into more of this, let me just kind of explain. So Russell Henderson was caught first, and then Aaron McKinney would be arrested. They were first charged with aggravated robbery, attempted murder, and kidnapping, but these charges would change after Matthew died. And attempted murder would be changed to first-degree murder, and with this upgrade, that meant the death penalty was on the table. Their girlfriends, Kristen Price and Chastity Pasley, were also arrested, and they were charged with accessory after the fact. These two would come in handy, and so would Russell Henderson when it came to piecing together the timeline of what happened to Matthew. And a lot of what they spoke about would come out during a pretrial hearing for Aaron McKinney. So these girls, basically, what they told authorities would be retold. Apparently, Matthew was seen as the perfect target for robbery, and Aaron McKinney pretended to be a homosexual in order to lure Matthew out of the bar and into his truck. Then, after he's in the truck, they start driving away with Russell Henderson. This is when McKinney starts wailing on Matthew after apparently Matthew touched his knee. He then forces Matthew to give over his wallet, and he still is beating him with his gun. He's pistol whipping him. From the information that Kristen Price gave, Aaron McKinney stated that his violence toward Matthew was because of how he felt towards gay people, and he felt extremely triggered by him, which this kind of falls apart. So ultimately, Aaron McKinney's the only one that goes to trial. And it's because of this, his trial starts in October of 1999 and ends in November of 1999. But earlier that year, in April, Russell Henderson pled guilty to murder and kidnapping, and this was a part of a plea deal. In order for him to not have the death penalty, he got 2 life sentences that would be served consecutively in exchange for him testifying against Aaron McKinney. So, Aaron McKinney and Matthew Shepard knew each other. This is not talked about a lot, and I wanted to talk about that specifically in this video, so a lot of people that have never heard of Matthew Shepard are learning full facts about Aaron McKinney and Matthew Shepard. A lot of what we see by the media is things they pick so that not the whole story is told. But Aaron McKinney and Matthew Shepard knew each other. So through the media, most people just believe that Aaron McKinney only knew Matthew because of picking him out, because he was a perfect target, and picked him up at the Fireside Bar or Fireside Lounge. But that's not the truth. Aaron McKinney was being pimped out or being gay for pay to help fuel his addiction to drugs. And in this world is where he met Matthew Shepard. So they met at a local bar in Denver back in late June of 1997. So a year prior. And it's during the summers of 1997 and 1998 that Matthew was living in Denver, and he became intertwined with this lifestyle of using methamphetamine and cocaine. And it's during this time that Aaron McKinney was a male escort under the direction of a man named Doc O'Connor, who was the person that first introduced them that summer in June. They met for the first time and had met for that first time, and then this next time they saw each other, they had a negative encounter. This is the first negative encounter they had, and this was in either August or September of 1998. So almost a year had gone by, and they're within the same worlds of each other. Aaron McKinney is being gay for pay to fuel his addiction. Matthew Shepard is using to basically numb what has happened to him. And it's during this encounter that they were apparently doing meth together in a car, and Aaron proposed a drug deal, and Matthew shut it down. And he didn't want to give out any merchandise without being paid. And this left Aaron extremely angry. Another encounter they have, which is in September of that year, the next negative encounter they had would be also in September of 1998. This is when Aaron sees Matthew at a convenience store and he yells at him to watch his back. During the last few days of Matthew's life, this is when things spiral out of control. Matthew goes dancing at a club in Fort Collins, but ends up experiencing suicidal thoughts. His friend Tina LeBray stays with him to make sure that he's okay. On October 3rd, Matthew suffers from extreme panic attacks. He ends up taking 15 of his anti-anxiety pills in order to calm himself down. He also calls his mother and just cries on the phone uncontrollably, and he would later on go to meet his dealer at the Fireside Lounge that afternoon. On the 4th, Matthew calls his friend Tina while he's at a bar, and he asks her to keep him company. And it's while he's on the phone, he seems really worried and really stuck in his head. Tina ends up staying with him at the bar, and after some time, she ends up leaving, and it's after this he spends time with Doc O'Connor at the club called the Eagles Club. And it's during this conversation where Matthew opens up about his feelings towards his AIDS diagnosis. On the 5th of October, Matthew goes to a store to get cold medicine. This is with his friend Tina, and they then go back to his apartment, and they end up watching movies together and just spending time together. October 6th, Aaron McKinney is almost out of his goodies or his drugs and his money. So he then ends up breaking into his cousin's house with the intentions of stealing from him. After this, he goes to work, completes his work shift for the day. He then plans to meet a dealer who supposedly has 6 ounces of meth. Aaron then decides he's going to rob this dealer of the meth, and his friend that he had been with, which is a man named Ken Hasselhun. Long story short, the plan ends up going haywire, and they end up meeting at the library bar at around 10 p.m. They wouldn't ultimately leave to go back to see if the dealer was home, or they would ultimately leave to go back to see if the dealer was home. The dealer is not home, but they end up going to the Fireside Bar at around 11:30 p.m. Matthew is sitting 4 to 5 seats down from where Aaron McKinney is. That day, in particular, the 6th, October 6th, Matthew is supposed to make a run to pick up and drop off goods in Fort Collins and go back to Laramie. Matthew then would hang out with his college friends and attends a LGBTA meeting. After this meeting, he's with his friends until about 9 p.m. He then is dropped off at his apartment. Around 10, he drives his Ford Bronco to the Fireside Lounge, and he goes there because it's karaoke night. He is sitting, like I mentioned, 4 to 5 seats down from Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson, or the assholes, as they were called. Apparently, they were being extremely rude inside of this bar, and not a lot of people wanted to sit near them. I wouldn't either. Like I mentioned previously, October 7th is when this case truly comes to life. So I previously mentioned that they offered Matthew a ride home because of Matthew's state of intoxication. It is when they get in the pickup truck between 12:15 a.m. and 12:30 a.m. Aaron forces Matthew to hand over his wallet, and he then proceeds to pistol whip him after apparently Matthew touches Aaron. After they get to this deserted area, he then forces them out of the car. So Aaron and Russell get out of the car with Matthew. He's still beating him. He forces Russell Henderson to tie Matthew up with some rope and then attaches him to this fence. It's after this that Russell tells him they need to stop, but Aaron hits him in the face with the gun after he mentions this. And right after Aaron hits Russell, this is when he hits Matthew for the final time, and Matthew is unconscious. Aaron and Russell speed off. They need to be away from this. Previously, like I mentioned, they ended up being involved in a fight on North 6th Street with two men. The police arrive at the scene. They see a gun in the car that's covered with blood in the truck, and they both run from the scene. Henderson, following this, goes to the ER for stitches due to being hit in the face. And it's around 6 p.m. on the 7th, which is when Matthew is seen and brought to the hospital. Following this is when Russell would be brought in for question, and with his girlfriend, and with Aaron McKinney's girlfriend as well. This is when the facts about the beating of Matthew, it comes out. Aaron McKinney is officially charged with attempted murder at around 11:30 p.m. on October 8th. The following day, Aaron McKinney confesses. Matthew Shepard dies on October 12th, 1998. President Clinton, in response to the death of Matthew Shepard, calls the hospital and speaks about his support for justice for Matthew Shepard. October 14th, President Clinton speaks to Congress in regards to the federal hate crimes bill. November 4th of 1999, Aaron McKinney gets sentenced to life without parole and no appeals. 2009, Judy Shepard, which is Matthew's mother, releases her book about her life with Matthew, which is called The Meaning of Matthew, My Son's Murder in Laramie, and a World Transformed. October 28th, 2009, President Obama signs the Matthew Shepard Act. This act makes assaults that are solely based on sexual orientation a crime legally, as they weren't before. I remember when this was signed, and I was so happy about this. Following the burial of Matthew's ashes, or interment, I should say, at Washington National Cathedral, his autopsy would be released. And it's after his autopsy is released that the coroner that did his autopsy explained as to why she deemed this a hate crime. Because there was a hand-shaped bruise on Matthew's groin, hence making this a hate crime and not a crime about robbery or drugs. His death is one that shouldn't have happened. But without his death, gay bashing crimes wouldn't be considered a thing. Gay bashing crimes wouldn't be considered a hate crime without the murder of Matthew Shepard. It saddens me that something like this is what it would take to change the way the justice system works and views hate crimes. It saddens me that it took a murder of a young man. It took the murder of this man to change the view of a lot of people in this world. This crime and like another one that two more I will be covering that are really hard for me to talk about because of the context of these cases. Those are Brandon Tina and Gwen Araujo, just like the death of Matthew Shepard, have covered this community in a giant black cloud of sadness. None of these murders should have happened, but they happened. So a lot of what I wanted to cover with Matthew Shepard's case, a lot of my notes that I've taken in regards to this case, I probably haven't talked about because talking about this makes me extremely sad, as I'm sure it saddens a lot of other people. But I hope whoever is watching this, you learn from not just his murder, but everything that surrounded this case. I hope you learn, or I hope you read or watch something about his murder, about how his parents felt. The Shepards went through so much when it came to this case. The constant people with signs saying that faggots shouldn't be in the world, that gay people are still a crime. There's so much hate that surrounds this community, and all they want, and I'm saying they as a generalized term, all that's wanted is to be included. Each person is different. Each person has a different background. Each person wants to be loved and accepted for who they are. And simply, Matthew Shepard was never accepted for who he was. He was never loved for who he was. Somebody that faked being gay for pay to fuel his meth rage took it out on Matthew Shepard. Somebody he knew and faked knowing to simply target for robbery. Somebody he knew and took him out just to fuel his meth rage. So that, my viewers, my subscribers, everybody that's watching this, I hope you learned something. There will be no comments allowed on this video because I don't want any bashing. I don't want anybody speaking negatively about this case, because this case is to inform you. This case is to help this community thrive. This case is to get more out about more of what happened to Matthew, more of what surrounded this case. I didn't go deeper into what a lot of other people have covered, and I did that on purpose because this has been such a highly publicized case that I wanted to cover things that hadn't been covered, like the fact that Aaron McKinney and Matthew Shepard knew each other. So with that being said, I hope you guys stick around and wait for my next video for Crimes on Pride. Have a good day, everybody.